Well, hello and welcome back. We are continuing. Essentially, this little project is replatforming, in a sense, I guess, an older Java application. So we're going to take an old web app that we ran through Tomcat, Apache Tomcat, and we're going to upgrade it to use Spring Boot. And so that's what we've been exploring. Now, the last time around, we showed how it's very easy to set up both a like a REST type of approach or a web type of approach. We can have our API, we can have our web pages, all of that running fairly simply through our various controllers. This episode, we're going to focus, and actually it's this episode, and will probably be a multi-parter as we get into this, but we're going to actually connect this thing up to some data. Now, I have an existing database, and you can see some examples of that. But what we're going to do is our examples of just creating a database. We're going to use MariaDB, and we're going to set a few things up here to get ourselves configured properly so that we can actually talk to our database. What we're going to end up doing, the goal, is we're going to have our little, we're going to add a new mapping called test. For right now, we'll give it a parameter just because. So that we could give it a parameter of, let's say, table, which is going to be our table name. And then it's not going to be required because we're not going to use it right now. We will get into that a little later. And I've got this thing called, there's a table I've got that I'm calling opportunity. Actually, the table, I think it's opportunities. But the opportunities table's got some data in it. So what we're going to do is we're going to list it for a specific user, list all the records for a specific user. And we're going to go just get a by ID, get a specific row in the database, and then print those out. What that looks like is pretty straightforward. So if I come in and hit that page, which is just here, it's just, if you can see up here, that was called test. And if I hit that page, then we're going to see here, when I do my get by ID, I'm going to print that item. And that is here, which is this big opportunity thing right here. And we'll show how to do that. And then I'm going through and I'm just listing the title of each opportunities, which is down, each of the opportunities, which is down here. Now, connecting to a database, you can use Hibernate, you can use JPA. There's some things you can do that can make this very simple. You don't have to get, generally speaking, you can have some CRUD stuff thrown up. CRUD being create, remove, update, or I'm sorry, retrieve, update, and delete. So you can have that basic functionality with the table. You can have that put together in 10 or 15 minutes. We may cover that in another one. In our case, we're going to do a lot of custom stuff, so it's just easier. And because that's how it was done before, we're going to use what's called JDBC Template. Now, with that, we're going to have our JDBC connector. One of the things that we do need to do is we're going to go to our project, if we haven't already, and we're going to go to starters, and we're going to make sure, if we do JDBC, we're going to make sure that we have the JDBC API, and we're also going to need it for, in this case, our MariaDB driver. So if I add those two, it's not going to do anything in my case because nothing has changed, so I'm just going to cancel. But go ahead and add those in, and that's going to make sure that you get a couple of key pieces. One of the things that we're going to have is we're going to have some application properties, and we're going to need to make sure that we set up these so that they connect to our database. Now, those are pretty straightforward. So what we're going to do is give it our username, give it a password, and these use spring.datasource, and that's .url to give us the, in this case, the JDBC link. This is actually, in our case, instead of MySQL, it's going to be MariaDB. And then we're going to give it a path. I can keep it pretty simple. So I'm just going to go here, the default port number. Here's my database name. Got to give it the driver. So Spring Data Source driver class name. And then we've got our, and then there's this thing I don't really need right now. That was actually a leftover from other. That's if you're going to use JPA's Hibernate, you would need that. In this case, it's going to ignore it because we don't need it. Now, that is to effectively connect to your database. Now, to actually do all this stuff to connect to that, we have a couple of classes we're going to make. And this is where the power of using object-oriented and making sure that you properly extract things or abstract things and put things where they need to be can help. Because what I'm going to end up doing, and what I've done here, is I've actually basically just copied about 6 different files out of the older version because they all connected. All I have to do is change up a couple of drivers or a couple of imports here and there, and then boom, I'm off and running. So let's start with the data itself. So in this case, I've got this thing called an opportunity. This is a table we're going to do. And so what I'm going to do, or the table we're going to work with, and what I'm going to do is I am going to have a object, a class that will be objects that is going to mimic or basically be my store for that data within the application. So I'm not going to necessarily always be directly dealing with the database. What I want to do is be able to load data from the database essentially into memory in objects that I'm going to work with in my application. And then with that, I'm going to be able to wheel and deal with them. And it's basically now an MVC. So this is my model. This is where the data lives. The controller is the backend that's going to basically save stuff or retrieve stuff. And then I've also got a view that's going to say, hey, this is how it's how I'm going to be able to view it. And we'll talk about the view at another point, because that's the hello controller. Right now, our view is nothing because we just spin something out and we have something in our control panel down here or in our console. So what we're going to do to make it simple, and that's where a lot of these are, each of these fields that we're doing is a column in the database. So if I flip over to my database, I can look at my table opportunities. I know it's a bit small, but it's just basically so you can see that, hey, I have got this opportunities table. Here's the columns I have. I've got an ID, a title, summary, blah, blah, blah. I've got several different columns. And so I'm going to take that and I'm going to model that into each row into a record in my database via this model class. In this case, it's a very simple one. It's just I've got an ID as my is an integer. The rest of the stuff is just straight up strings. Even though I've got like a date and some stuff like that, I'm not putting any special types. So the easy way to do this is you generate those properties. You're going to have in each case, you're going to have a getter and a setter. And then at the end here, I just override toString. You can generate these super fast if you don't already know. If you are in Eclipse or something like it, and I know that other IDEs have it. This is just the specific way Eclipse does it. But if you come in here, you could say generate getters and setters. And so this one's already generated all of them. If I take it like this, though, let me just do that. And so if I do this, so if I just enter my properties and I say generate getters and setters, it's going to say, okay, which fields do you want? And you can't, I don't know how well you can see this because it is small text, but it is basically just listing all of my fields here. So I can pick 1 or 2 or all of them, and then it'll tell me where I can place it, and it will go generate. So if I do select all and generate, boom, it just generated getters and setters for each of them. So like example, you can see like here's where it says get amount, and somewhere else here's where it has set amount. So I can get that generated real quick. I can also do from that, I can also do a toString. That's another one that I can generate very quickly. So if I do, it already has one, but what it does is it just puts the class name, if you can see the class name up here, and then just walks through each of the values and prints them out. So it's pretty darn easy to generate your model real fast. That's just one of those things that modern IDEs will allow us to do that. Now, that is our in-memory model. What we also need is we're going to need a data access object. And what this is this is going to say in the with our model, we want to be able to integrate it or work with our database. So we want to do stuff like we want to be able to save or update a record. We want to be able to get a record based on an ID. We want to be able to delete a record. And we want to be able to list all the records, or based on some query, we want to be able to list a bunch of records. This is key because one of the things we did in our sample here is we do a list, which is what we're going to be building here in a second. And we also do a get. So get by ID and a list. There are a couple different ways you could name these things. We do a straight up get and assume it's going to be ID. There could be things like you might do search, you might do find, you might do get by name, get by title, things like that. But what we do in our DAO is all this is this is going to be an interface because we're going to end up implementing it somewhere else. So what we do here is we put each one of our methods that we're going to call, we do the signature here. So like here, I don't know why that says over. That's an interesting name for that. I don't know, but let's just call this opportunity. I'm going to clean this up a little bit because I don't know why I called it that. And then, so now I've got to go find this. And what I'm going to do is once I've built this interface, I'm going to have to turn around and build an implementer because I'm going to make use of it. So there's not anything really special we have to do at the DAO. I'm just taking the model that I created. That's going to be, because I am using that to some extent, like here, I'm returning a list of opportunities. Here, I'm returning an opportunity. Here, I'm passing one in. So you're going to usually see that model used quite a bit in the interface. So you want to include that in. And then the meat of it comes with the implementation side.
Well, hello, this is Rob with Developreneur, also known as Building Better Developers. Wanted to announce that we have school.developreneur.com. Feel free to check it out if you like any of this information, any of the content that we've sent, and you would like to see more. You can come out, you can enroll for free. We have free courses. We've got places for you to get better at just learning a technology, our how-tos. You can work on your business skills. We can help you with becoming a better developer, as in coding and things like that. A lot of the stuff you've seen on YouTube, we also have out at school.developreneur. We just have it in a little more of a educational format and a way for you to track your progress as you move forward becoming a better developer.